I woke to the weight of someone straddling me. Not rough, not jarring, but firm, warm thighs settling on my hips. A hand gently braced on my chest. My eyes blinked open to the dim gold light spilling through the hallway, and I froze, not in fear, but in disbelief, as I realized who it was hovering above me. It was Nate, my son's best friend, 22 years old. Broad-shouldered from years of sports, a jawline you could balance a glass on, and eyes that always lingered a second longer than they should have when we crossed paths in the kitchen. And now he was in my bed, on top of me, shirtless, breath shallow, pupils wide. "Don't freak out," he said quietly, his voice steady, but laced with something trembling underneath. "I am Nate. What are you doing?" I asked, my voice low, my hands instinctively going to his hips, not to push him off, but because I didn't know what else to do with them. "I couldn't sleep," he said, gaze flicking between my eyes and my lips. "I've been trying not to think about this for months. But you let me stay. You opened the door." And maybe he was right. Maybe I had opened something. But to understand why this moment didn't send me straight into panic, or guilt, or denial, you'd have to know everything that came before it. A month ago, my son flew out for a work trip, and Nate showed up at our house with a backpack and a grin. He said I could crash here till Tuesday. "You cool with that?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. Nate had been around for years. He helped me move furniture, fixed my leaky faucet once, and called me by my first name only when no one else was around. He was kind, thoughtful, and entirely too aware of himself for someone his age. We spent that first night watching a game in the living room. He took the floor. I took the couch. At some point he leaned back against the edge of the sofa, so close our shoulders almost touched, and I should have noticed how long he stayed like that. The next morning, he was already in the kitchen, shirtless, pouring coffee like he'd lived here his whole life. "You always up this early?" I asked, trying not to look at the line of muscle running down his torso. "Only when I want to be noticed," he said. I laughed it off, but I noticed. That weekend, things got blurry in the quiet ways. He started calling me man less and started saying my name more. Mark. He'd stand too close. His eyes would drift when I handed him a drink. One night, he walked past me after a shower, towel low, hair damp, and said, "I always thought older guys had it figured out." And I just stared at him, pretending I didn't feel heat creeping into my neck. Still, I didn't act. I didn't even speak on it. I buried it deep and told myself he was just being playful, young, naive. But now, with him on top of me, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Not about him. Not about what I wanted. He didn't move right away. He just sat there on my hips, breath uneven, looking down at me like he was still daring me to tell him no, but hoping, maybe even praying, that I wouldn't. "Nate," I whispered, still half frozen in the space between confusion and something a whole lot deeper. "This is dangerous." "Only if we lie about it," he said, and I felt his thumbs press gently against my ribs like he already knew how I'd respond. I could have told him to get off me. I could have made a joke. I could have rolled away and called it a night, chalked this up to some confused 22-year-old playing with fire in the house of a man who should have known better. But I didn't. Instead, I reached up and rested my hand softly on the back of his neck. "Then tell me the truth," I said, voice quieter now, barely a breath. He didn't hesitate. "I've wanted you since the first time we talked alone. Not in some childish crush way. Not in a 'you're my best friend's dad' kind of thing. But in the way that I see you. I've always seen you." My heart hit the wall of my chest hard. Not just because of the words, but because I knew exactly what he meant. I'd spent so long being seen by everyone as dad or ex-husband or safe, boring Mark. I forgot what it felt like to be looked at like I was still wanted. And here was this man, yes, man, not kid, seeing me like that. And not just with his eyes, with his whole body. I sat up slowly, and he let me. His thighs shifted around me as we came chest to chest, our faces close, the tension building like the last breath before a storm breaks. "Have you thought about what this would mean?" I asked. He nodded. "Every damn day since I was 19. I blinked. "That long? You were always careful. I was waiting for the day you'd stop pretending you didn't feel it too." And maybe that was the part that shook me the most, because he wasn't wrong. There were always little things I brushed off. How my eyes lingered when he smiled. How I'd feel something tighten in my chest whenever he stretched, shirt rising too high. How I never asked him to stop calling me by my name, even after I knew it wasn't casual. We kissed. Soft at first. Just lips brushing, like we were testing the heat before falling in. But then his fingers tangled in my hair, and mine slid up his bare back, and it turned into something deeper, something that felt too good to call a mistake. His tongue moved gently against mine, and I groaned into him before I could stop it. His chest was warm, solid, pressed against mine, and I could feel how badly he wanted me, not just physically, but emotionally. Like he needed to prove something not to me, but to himself. That he could love someone older. That desire didn't come with a clock. That he wasn't just crashing on my couch because he had nowhere else to go, but because I was the place he wanted to land. We didn't go all the way that night. We kissed until our lips were sore, touched until our fingers knew the shape of each other's breath, and lay tangled on the bed until sleep took us both down slowly. And when I woke up the next morning, the sun warm across our skin, his head resting on my shoulder. I didn't feel guilt. I felt seen, and that scared me more than anything. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight was pouring across the bed in quiet streaks, and for a split second, I let myself believe it had all been a dream, that the night before, the kiss, the touch, the weight of Nate's body over mine, had been some vivid fantasy born out of months of silent longing. But then I turned my head and there he was, still asleep, still shirtless, still nestled against me like he'd belonged there for years and had only just let himself arrive. His leg was hooked over mine, one arm draped across my stomach, fingers twitching now, and then like even in sleep, he didn't want to let go. And I laid there, completely still, trying to figure out how something that should have felt terrifying now felt like a strange kind of peace. He stirred eventually, blinking against the light, and when he looked up at me, he didn't flinch. He didn't rush to explain or apologize. He just smiled, slow and a little shy. "Hey," he said, voice still thick from sleep. "Hey," I replied. There was a long pause between us, full of everything that had changed and everything we hadn't said. "I didn't cross a line last night, did I?" he asked, eyes searching mine. I shook my head. "You didn't take anything I wasn't giving." He let out a breath, relieved, then shifted to rest his chin on my chest. "So now what?" That question sat heavy. Because reality has a way of creeping in quickly, even when you're wrapped in warmth. "Nate," I said slowly, "I need to ask, is this just about attraction? Or is this something real for you?" He didn't look away. "It's real. I've had plenty of crushes. I've hooked up, sure. But you? You make me want to slow down. You make me feel like I don't have to perform or prove anything. I've wanted that for a long time." My throat tightened. No one had said that to me in years, not with that kind of clarity. Not without conditions. We got up eventually, and I half expected things to feel awkward, like we'd tiptoe around each other, unsure what to say. But instead, we moved in sync. He made eggs while I poured coffee. He danced barefoot in the kitchen while Max, my German shepherd, watched us with sleepy suspicion. He laughed when I bumped him with my hip and grinned when I poured syrup down the wrong side of his plate. It felt like something we'd done 100 times before. Like we'd skipped all the trial and error and fallen into rhythm. And yet, part of me still braced for the fallout. Later that afternoon, my son FaceTimed from his hotel. Nate was back in the guest room, scrolling his phone like nothing had changed, and I sat on the couch trying to keep my voice even while guilt threatened to knot itself into my gut. "How's Nate?" my son asked casually. "He's been great," I said. "Respectful, helpful. You guys getting along?" "Yeah," I said, and swallowed hard. "Better than I expected." My son smiled, totally unaware, and changed the subject. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just something that happened. This was something I would have to carry. Something we both would. Not with shame, but with caution. Because the world wasn't going to understand. Not my son. Not our friends. Maybe not even Nate's own parents. And yet, I didn't want to let it go. Not when I'd finally found someone who looked at me and saw now, not used to be. That night, Nate came into my room again. He didn't ask this time. He just climbed into bed, curled against me, and whispered, "I don't want to hide, but I'll wait until you're ready." And that sentence broke me open in the gentlest way, because no one had ever waited for me before. The next few days blurred in the way good things often do. Slow mornings filled with quiet glances, late-night whispers that meant more than the words themselves, and long stretches of time where it was just us in the same space, doing nothing but feeling everything. Nate stayed in the guest room on paper. His shoes, his charger, his backpack, all there for appearances. But each night, just past midnight, the hallway creaked and the door eased open. And each time, He slid into my bed without speaking, curled behind me, his breath warm against my neck, one arm wrapping around my chest like it belonged there. We didn't need to say much. The touch was the conversation. But routine breeds attention. On Thursday, the neighbor, Susan, 2 doors down, stopped me during my morning walk with Max. "That your son's friend staying over again?" she asked, eyes just a little too curious. "Yeah," I said, careful. "He's helping me out while Josh is away." She nodded, smiled, then leaned in. "He's cute. Doesn't act like a kid, that one." I laughed it off, but inside, I felt the stirrings of something I hadn't felt in years. Panic, not guilt, not regret, but the fear of being seen. That night, Nate noticed my quiet. We were on the back deck. He was in my hoodie, legs stretched over my lap, head tilted toward the sky, like he was learning the constellations for the first time. "You okay?" he asked, not looking at me. "Yeah, just thinking. About." I hesitated. "What happens if people find out?" I said. "If my son does." Nate was silent for a long moment, then turned to me slowly. "I can't promise you it'll be easy or smooth, but I can promise I won't lie about what this is to me." "And what is it?" His fingers brushed mine. The first time I felt like I'm not pretending. We didn't touch that night, not in the way we had before. We just lay side by side, hands clasped between us, the silence filled with unspoken understanding. But by morning, he kissed me like a promise, his lips lingering, his hands firm, his eyes clear. And I knew then that this wasn't something I could put back in the box. That weekend, my son came home. His keys hit the counter. His bag dropped by the door. And he greeted us both with a hug like nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Nate and I were different now. Not cautious, not ashamed, but aware. We moved with care, sat apart during dinner, chose our words carefully. But the gravity between us? It didn't fade. Even Josh noticed it once, his eyes flicking between us during a movie night. A pause before he asked Nate if he wanted to crash in his room instead of the guest one. Nate glanced at me, just for a second, and smiled. "I'll stay where I've been," he said simply. "Feels more comfortable now." Later that night, when the house was asleep, Nate came to my room again. Only this time, before climbing into bed, he sat beside me and asked, "Do you want me to stop?" I looked at him. This 22-year-old who had more honesty in his chest than most men twice his age, and I said, without hesitation, "No," because the truth was, he was the only part of my life that made sense right now, and I was finally ready to stop living in pieces. The house was fuller with Josh home again. The fridge emptied faster, the hallway echoed more with half-laughed jokes, and the quiet-eyed groan used to was replaced by the comfort of routine. But underneath that normal rhythm, something very different pulsed just beneath the surface. Me and Nate, moving carefully in the same space, close but untouching, like magnets just barely resisting contact. We were careful, too careful, and it was starting to hurt. Nate still slept in my bed every night, but only after the lights were out and the doors were closed. He kissed me like he missed me, even when we'd just been sitting across from each other at dinner. And I held him like I knew this season couldn't last. One morning, I made coffee while Josh was still asleep, and Nate came up behind me, rested his chin on my shoulder, and whispered, "This isn't sustainable." I didn't turn to face him. I couldn't. "I know. I don't want to be a secret," he said. "You're not," I replied. "Not to me." But to him, he asked softly. And that silence, it said everything I couldn't. That afternoon, Nate left to stay with a friend across town. Not in anger, not even as a threat, just because he needed to breathe, and I couldn't ask him to keep holding his breath inside a house where every glance had to be edited. "I'll give you space," he said, "but I'm not walking away." And then he kissed me, soft, slow, eyes closed, and left. The next few days felt hollow. I still saw Josh, still played the role, still sat on the porch every night with a beer in my hand and too many thoughts in my head. But everything felt quieter without Nate. And that's when I realized something. I didn't miss the thrill. I missed him. The way he looked at me when I wasn't saying anything. The way his touch made me forget how old I was or how stuck. The way he made me want things I thought I'd outgrown. On the 4th day, Josh found me in the garage. He was holding his phone, his expression unreadable. "Dad," he said slowly, "can I ask you something weird?" I braced myself. "Yeah, Sure. Are you and Nate good? I blinked. Good. He looked awkward, rubbing the back of his neck. He hasn't really talked to me since he left. And I don't know. I've seen how he looks at you sometimes. Silence fell hard between us. I had a choice. Lie, deflect, or finally speak the truth. I chose the third. We're figuring things out, I said gently. It wasn't planned. It's complicated, but it's real. Josh stared at me. Then he sighed. You know what? I think I always kind of knew. You did? Yeah. I mean, he's never looked at anyone else like that, not in years. Not even the guys he's dated. I swallowed hard. Does it bother you? He shrugged. I don't know. It's weird, but not bad weird. Just adjustment weird. He stepped closer. As long as you're not going to break him or disappear on him, I won't. He nodded. Then I guess we're okay. That night, I texted Nate. Come back. I told him. His reply was almost instant. On my way. And when he walked through the door, dropped his bag, and wrapped his arms around me like he'd never left, it didn't feel forbidden anymore. It just felt like something that was finally allowed. He stood there in the doorway for only a second before crossing the room and kissing me like nothing else mattered. No hesitation, no checking if I was sure, because by now, he knew I was. The kiss wasn't about lust or nerves or blurred boundaries anymore. It was about arrival. Nate was home. Not because he didn't have anywhere else to go, but because this was where he wanted to be. We didn't waste time. He dropped his bag by the couch, kicked off his shoes, and pulled me back into our rhythm like he'd only left hours ago. His hands found my face, and mine found the curve of his back. And when we finally lay together again, skin to skin, hearts beating slow, and even, it felt like something had locked into place that couldn't be undone. There was no more sneaking around. No more whispered nights or shadowed mornings. Just us. Two men, years apart, worlds different, but meeting at the same exact place. The next morning, Josh came downstairs to the smell of coffee in 2 mugs instead of 1. He paused in the doorway, saw us sitting shoulder to shoulder at the counter, Nate shirtless, me wearing the smile I hadn't found in years, and just nodded. You make eggs, Nate? He asked casually. Nate smirked. I make great eggs. And just like that, it was normal. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. The neighbors talked. They always do. Whispers about why Nate's car was parked outside more often, about how we suddenly spent weekends repainting the porch and buying plants from the farmer's market like a couple nesting in secret. But we didn't answer to them, because what we had didn't need defending. Weeks turned to months. He found a job closer to home. I cleared out a drawer in my dresser without being asked. He started leaving his books on the coffee table, and I stopped pretending I didn't love the sound of his laugh filling the house. We never sat down to define it. We just lived it, day by day, touch by touch, choice by choice. And one night, curled up together on the couch while Max snored on the floor, Nate looked at me and said, You know, I never thought I'd fall in love in my 20s with a man who already thought he'd done his best loving. I turned to him, heart full, eyes warm, and I never thought I'd fall in love again at all. He kissed me then, slow, steady, honest. And we stayed like that, not chasing time, not fearing it, just being. And if you've listened this far, now I want to ask you, have you ever found love in a place where it wasn't supposed to happen, but somehow felt exactly right? Tell me in the comments. Because sometimes, the love that surprises you is the one that stays.